It's The Lit Show with Jeremy Fee. New episode each Tuesday. Authors welcome, comments encouraged. Hello everyone, welcome to The Lit Show. I'm your host, Jeremy Fee. As always, I've got something special for you today. Let's have a discussion about whether or not you should read, or maybe reread, the Dark Tower series by Stephen King. I'm just going to give you a hint. My answer is both no and yes. I'm going to start with no. No, I do not think you should read this series if you have not already read a lot of Stephen King. No, I do not think you should read this series if you have not read the 1927 poem From the Dark Tower by County Cullen. And no, I do not think you should read this series if you have not read the 1855 poem by Robert Browning titled Childe Roland to the Dark Tower Came. And even more so, you probably should not read the series if you are unfamiliar with Shakespeare's play King Lear. That's right. You've got a lot of work to do as a reader in order to prepare yourself for the Dark Tower. But the answer would be yes, I do think you should read the series if you like weird multi-genre stories. If you are into stories that have a multiverse, that have different dimensions and realities and time travel and weird characters and all kinds of strange elements, yeah, read this series. If you are a huge Stephen King fan and you have read a lot of what Stephen King has already written, especially Salem's Lot, Insomnia, It, and The Stand, then I think you may be ready for the Dark Tower series. But please do not go into this series blind. Down below I'm going to put some links. There's a great 7-minute video that you can watch where a YouTuber has put together all the links, well, a lot of the links to Stephen King's other books. And without really giving you spoilers, it will allow you to see just how much of a web there is and how much you really should be well read in Stephen King's work before you jump into it. So you might want to check out that video. Also, I watch discussions. Steve talks about books, used to have monthly discussions with a group he put together. I was reading along with them for a while until I decided that I was tired of just doing one book a month in the series, and I just went ahead and finished it. But I used to show up at those discussions, listen to what they had to say, so I'll try and link that below. Also, there was here just recently a discussion hosted by Andrew at Wizardly Reads with Sarah Reads and Bookish Chaz and Joanna. It was a wonderful discussion. I showed up for that one as well. My thoughts about the Dark Tower have been informed by a lot of people, and watching, listening, and or participating in multiple discussions. But here we go. This goes really, really far deep. If you like stories that have a rabbit hole that you can go down in order to try to figure out, that's what this series is doing. By the way, my cat Daxter says hello. He's meowing while I'm recording. So Shakespeare, back a long time ago, writing and putting on plays in the 1590s and early 1600s, had the play King Lear. And you look to Act 3, Scene 4, lines 195 to 197, and you get the dialogue, Childe Roland to the Dark Tower came. His word was still, Fi, fo, and fum. I smell the blood of a British man. Those lines might sound familiar if you remember your childhood with the story of Jack and the Beanstalk. Jack climbing up the beanstalk, going to steal the treasure from the giant that lived up in the clouds. Believe it or not, scholars have done the work and looked at different cultures and history and how stories have been passed down over the ages. Somewhere around 4,000, 5,000, maybe even 6,000 years ago, we get the story of Jack and the Beanstalk, in which Jack is going to steal an ogre's treasure. The idea of an underdog, a young hero who is trying to steal some sort of treasure from a monster or giant, some sort of monstrous character, that treasure being an important element, these heroic ideas, the same themes and motifs, goes way back then. And I mentioned Jack and the Beanstalk because fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman. Those lines I've always remembered because my last name is Fee, so in my childhood, fee, fi, fo, fum really stood out to me. So if you stop and think about it, there are connections that go back thousands of years for this storytelling. Also, clearly, there are connections with the idea of King Arthur and the Arthurian legends that are woven throughout the series. The 1855 poem by Robert Browning is really important. Childe Roll Into the Dark Tower came. You can read that poem, get a sense of those ideas once again. In 1927, County Cullen, with the poem From the Dark Tower, is attempting to help people understand the experience of the Harlem Renaissance, Black Americans who are dealing with racism and all kinds of issues, and how important that is. Those messages are there in the Dark Tower series. All of it ends up connecting, believe it or not. We get a lot of literature throughout the 20th and 21st century now. A lot of fantasy novels, short stories that reference Childe Roland, that talk about the Dark Tower. There are songs, radio plays, all kinds of stuff. So when Stephen King wrote the Dark Tower series, he was not doing this in a vacuum. It did not come out of nowhere. We get a very weird multi-genre, multiverse tale. It's tying in a lot of his own novels and all kinds of stuff. To help you understand the years, it was 1982 that The Gunslinger, the first book in the series, is published. Then 1987 is The Drawing of the Three as the second book. The third book was published in 1991, The Wastelands. Can you imagine having to wait all those years between the series? Now, thank goodness, you can just pick it up and read it all at once. Book 4 in the series was 1997. That's another huge gap for Wizard and Glass. Then in 1998, there was a prequel story, The Little Sisters of Illyria. In 2003 was book 5 in the series, Wolves of the Kala. And then in 2004, books 6 and 7 came out, Song of Susanna and The Dark Tower. Stephen King announced he was done with the series. There was a clear ending at the end of book 7, The Dark Tower. But then in 2012, Stephen King revisited the characters and ideas in a book called The Wind Through the Keyhole that then gets put in the timeline as book 4.5. And this is a frustration that a lot of people have with the series, because if you buy it off the shelf now, you look it up online, you probably think you should read them in that numbered order and not the publication order. In fact, when all those monthly discussions were happening with the reading group from Steve Talks Books, in those discussions, they specifically talked about the reading order and that you should read The Wind Through the Keyhole last, you should read it in publication order. Silly me, I ignored that. I thought I somehow knew better than the people who'd already read the series, and I read them in the order that they're numbered, which I don't think is a good idea. I think I did poorly. I made a poor decision when I did that. But I also don't necessarily think it would be great to read it last immediately after you've just finished the series. I think one of the reasons that a lot of people say that they liked the book was because it had been about 8 years since the series ended, and they were just happy to see the characters again. Alright, let's go back. I'll give you an overview. This is not meant to be a spoiler discussion. I try to avoid giving spoilers that have any sort of meaningful impact on the story. I don't like to reveal the unexpected twists and turns in a story. But in talking about the series, I'm going to mention some details. These are details that I don't think are spoilery because I don't think they would ruin any sort of surprise that makes a difference to character development, that sort of thing. But I think it's worth noting some weird things that happen along the way. If you don't like spoilers at all, I apologize. This may seem somewhat ambiguous territory going forward. The first book in the series, The Gunslinger, is very different from the rest of the series. It could kind of stand on its own. It is more of a weird sci-fi fantasy western with the gunslinger chasing the man in black and events that happen along the way that to me felt somewhat like The Matrix or Westworld, though it seems somewhat unfair to mention that because the movies for The Matrix came out after this. The Westworld TV series came out after this, obviously, but there was a book for Westworld for the original movie that was published, what I guess would have been before The Gunslinger. But it's a really interesting feel, and I greatly enjoyed the first book, and not to upset fans of the series, but I actually would have been happy if the rest of the series was very similar to the first book. But it greatly morphs and changes into something that seems more like a comic book superhero multiverse sort of tell going forward. In fact, the second book, The Drawing of the Three, has powers in it that are similar to the recent film Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, because it deals with people being able to send kind of their astral projection or soul or mind out and kind of possess or control people's bodies in a multiversal sort of way. It's really interesting how that happens. The story, the second book in the series, is about forming an adventuring party, really. Putting together that group of found family or friends who are going to be training with the main character, Roland the Gunslinger, and trying to help people and solve problems. But it's very weird how it does that. The third book, The Wastelands, there have been a lot of different covers over the years. I really like the cover with the train on the front, and I ultimately found that cover to be misleading because in my mind, I projected a different concept to this book onto what I got. I thought that it was going to be about the characters traveling through on a train like a Western, but in this weird post-apocalyptic wasteland. It's also worth noting that Wastelands is 2 words in the title, and not how it's used a lot of times today as just 1 word as a wasteland. But anyway, the main story is not them just traveling on a train the whole book. In fact, them getting to the train is near the end of the story for that book, and then the train features predominantly at the beginning of the next book, and they have to deal with it there. So that's what I mean by mild spoiler territory here. Things that don't really mean anything to you right now if you haven't read it, but I found a little bit strange. I did enjoy the stuff going on with the train. And then the 4th book is Wizard and Glass. In this one, they take a little bit of a departure. After they deal with the train stuff, they end up traveling, and so there are opportunities for them to just kind of sit around the campfire and talk and share stories. And so book 4 is mostly Roland telling a story of his adventuring party from the past, the group that he used to be a part of. And so if you're the type of person that likes your narrative to just continue going forward, this might bother you at this point. But it is really fascinating. It's an interesting story, and I'm sure that fans of the series would say the important ideas that come about from that matter when you are thinking overall about the themes of the series and what's going on. And this is where I point out that the 2012 release, The Wind Through the Keyhole, is numbered as book 4.5 in the series, which is awkward if you read them in that order, because book 4 has that deviation from the main plot, and then that book, The Wind Through the Keyhole, does that again. It has them, oh yeah, we're traveling, hanging out, listening to stories, and so it does that again with a different story, which is why it's a little bit annoying if you read them back to back, because you are waiting even longer for the main plot to move forward. But then you get to book 5, and I really enjoyed how the plot seriously moved forward. And this is where, if you do not know the story from Stephen King's Salem's Lot, you are going to miss out on a lot. I had watched the film, so thank goodness I knew the characters and the situations, and it made sense to me. And I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say Stephen King gets so weird at this point that there are elements from Star Wars and Harry Potter that bleed into this. This was published in 2003. It's a very strange way that the multiverse is coming together, and I don't know what sort of deal Stephen King and his publishers worked out with those other book franchises, or if they ever sued or didn't sue, all the legal elements, but my mind was blown. I was fascinated how all of that came together and was used within the story, because Stephen King's not just using his own books and works and connecting with all that, but now he's bringing in other universes. Then you get to the 2004 publication where Stephen King seriously just decided he's going to finish the series. So you get the 2003 book 5, 2004 you get books 6 and 7, Song of Susanna and the Dark Tower, to bring it all to a close. It gets very emotional. I really can't give you details about the events here because they would be definite spoilers, but there's a lot happening as it all ties together with the characters and the situations. Some people say that the ending is predictable. Other people are not expecting it as much. Something that's fascinating about the ending is Stephen King, in the narration, tells you, the reader, that you can stop reading at one point. You know, basically, if you want the happy ending and to feel like you're satisfied with a conclusion, you may want to stop right here, and then the story continues. And I mean, who's not going to continue reading at that point to get to the real ending? It's a fascinating series. I enjoyed reading it, but I wish I had read Stephen King's Insomnia. I wish that I knew more about some of the lore that was brought in before I read it, which is why I caution you, dear viewer, do not read this too early. Do not try and experience this series before you are ready for it. A lot of fans also rave it is a great series to reread. The first book in the series is going to mean a lot more to you after you have read the last book, after you've been through the whole ordeal. And I'm sure there are plenty of details that I would pick up on as Easter eggs or interesting lines and scenes that, having read the series once, going back and rereading it, I would pick up on more. But I have so much to read, I'm not going to reread it anytime soon. So it may be a long time before I revisit it. I hope this video helped you to answer the question for yourself, but feel free to join the discussion down below. Would you like to read the series? Are you planning to read the series? Do you have a timeline for when you want to get to it? You might want to make a checklist of all the things you need to read first just to get to the series. Or have you already read it? Do you disagree with anything I've said, etc., etc.? Do all those awesome things with all the buttons and making comments. You guys are awesome every day. It's a great day for a book talk. Peace.